You're listening to Rock On Radio with your host, Josh Howard. The goal of today's show is to make you astonished as to how effective radio advertising actually is, as well as the advantages and disadvantages of local businesses doing radio advertising. Let's get into the meat of the effectiveness of radio advertising by revealing the answers to topics such as what type of businesses still buy radio ads, how much money businesses invest in ads, social media's influence on ads, the impact of technology for better or worse on ads, and different businesses' thoughts on how effective radio advertising actually is for them. First, here's a brief yet fun overview on the history of radio before we plunge into the world of radio advertising. Radio is a viable medium that has been entertaining people since the early 1920s. According to TechWholesale.com, the first radio station ever launched was KDLA in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania in 1920 through a business by the name of Westinghouse, which also gave birth to the concept of radio sponsor programs through selling radios to society as a whole. In the beginning, as stated by WeirdFacts.com, radio's golden age rocked on from the early 1920s to the 1940s, in which it played soap operas, mystery shows, and dramatic series that would be shown on television today. WeirdFacts.com also states that major corporations and stations such as NBC, ABC, and CBS owned several radio stations. Likewise, as told by GreatAchievements.org, Edwin Armstrong brought FM radio to this world in 1933. As seen from FamousDaily.com, the radio industry brought FM radio to life in 1939 in Bloomfield, Connecticut, with the station WDRC. Just like WeirdFacts.com states, radio's main purpose in its early days was to inform the public on events and news related to World War II. Then, TechWholesale.com reveals that shortly after World War II, FM radio began to slowly conquer AM radio, and different music formats such as rock and roll and the top 40 began to emerge in the 1950s. Gather around for the purpose of today's show, which is to show how effective radio advertising actually is, including advantages and disadvantages for businesses and radio people with different viewpoints from both. Today, I have the CEO of Big Radio in Janesville, Wisconsin, Ben Thompson, to present his opinion on what the most popular type of companies or industries are who buy radio ads from Big Radio, as well as how much they spend on average for radio advertising.
Typically, the biggest industries for our business are car dealers and then also healthcare providers like hospitals and clinics. It really varies based off of the industry and based off of the company. We have Big Radio clients who spend just a couple $100 a year all the way up to a couple $100,000 a year. So it really varies quite a bit based off the company.
The market president for Town Square Media in Rockford, Illinois, Michael Giuliano, buys radio advertising and added,
"It really varies because sometimes certain formats do better with other businesses, but in general, big categories. Automotive is always a big category for radio stations. Healthcare is big for us here in Rockford. Universities, education is another big one. And then stations that skew a little bit older tend to do more in the financial market. And then banks and investment companies, things like that. Stations that skew a little bit younger, beverage, Pepsi, and those kind of products are big categories."
You are probably curious as to how much businesses roughly spend on ads from Town Square Media. Well, Town Square's one and unique account rep Heather Olson had this to say.
If you're looking at a monthly investment, local direct, as in a smaller mom pa shop, anywhere from average-wise $500 to $1,100 a month. If you're looking at more of a national, larger scale car dealer per se, let's say hospital, you're looking somewhere between $2,500 and $5,000 a month.
Now it's time to switch gears from the type of businesses that buy radio ads to psychology and demographics of radio listeners in today's world. In today's digital age, radio is adapted to the worlds of satellite and online. As justified by FundingUniverse.com, XM Satellite Radio was born in 2001, followed by Sirius in 2002, which led to both of them merging together in 2008 to develop into what it is known as today, Sirius XM Radio. Different listeners have different preferences since who listens to the radio more, men or women. Liz Rudolph, honor personality and the director for WWHG-FM 105.9 The Hogs marketing at Big Radio, had this in mind.
Again, going back to demographics with our stations, that differs a little bit. You might have a station that leans a little bit more female and one that leans a little bit more male, but really it's going to even out to be about 50-50.
Moreover, Big Radio's regional sales rep Adam Schediger is also very knowledgeable for who steps up from his or her business and asks for radio advertising more, men or women.
That's got to be pretty close to 50-50. Women do make the majority of the buying decisions, whether that's really honestly pretty much anything. It's definitely more women that make those buying decisions, but I don't think that either one is more selective incentive to choose radio over the other.
Here's Heather Olson's little bit of a different take on this.
All depends on who the decision maker is within. But I think probably overall, maybe if I had to pick, I would say maybe women a little bit more.
We're going to dig deeper into other aspects of radio advertising demographics. Keep in mind that the range of people ages 55 to 64 listen to radio the most, as told by EdisonResearch.com. Liz had her own thought on radio advertising demographics.
That is going to depend on the business and the station. So, for example, your demographics are going to differ between each station. Even here at Big Radio and the 3 stations that I work with, the demographics differ between the Hog, which is a classic and modern rock station, Iron Country down in Beloit, that's a genuine country station, and then the Beat, which is 90s and 2000s hits. So, those 3 stations have very different demographics, and therefore they have different audiences that we would target advertising to. It depends on the business that you're advertising, which station you would put them on. For example, if you were a bar that was advertising an event for motorcycle riders, that would be popular on the Hog, which is our rock station, because our listening audience is in that demographic. Whereas you probably wouldn't put an ad for motorcycles on the Beat, for example. That's our 90s 2000 station, because that's going to lead a little bit more female and the demo is going to be a little bit younger, just different audiences. So the popularity of your ads depends on your audience for your station.
A similar view is grasped by TownSquare's other account rep, Amy.
It depends on which station. For example, WZOK is a little bit of a younger demographic where there may be like 18 to 35 or 40-year-olds, and Q98.5 is about a 35 to a 54-year-old.
WZOK FM stands for 97.5 FM. It is TownSquare Media's modern-day popular music station, and Q98.5 is TownSquare's country station, both of which are located in Rockford. Adam is back again to educate us on social media's impact on radio ads.
Social media has been impactful on pretty much any mainstream form of advertising, whether that's television, billboards, print, etc. The thing that really still separates us is the cost per thousand. So the cost per thousand to reach 1,000 people on social media is actually greater than the cost to reach 1,000 people through radio. So radio is a mass reach medium, which means that it's going to reach everybody. It's the number one reaching medium. If you buy all of the stations in a given market, you really are going to reach everybody. The difference with social media is that you're very, very targeted as to who you're advertising to. So rather than reaching those masses, you're reaching out to a small group of people.
Amy partakes a different stand.
I think it's changed the way that people market their business, because now they can be seen and heard on social media as well.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to discover why certain businesses are more apt to do radio ads than others. I'm back, and I'm delving into the topic of localism. According to PrometheusRadio.org, localism is the idea that giving the residents and communities in cities equal access to owning and broadcasting radio stations enables them to develop connections in their own communities. This particular concept also entails that radio stations are required to inform the public of local news occurring in the community. I kind of think that localism creates an equal and fair share of revenue from radio ads for radio stations. Ben has his own thought.
Yeah, I think localism allows radio stations to capture more revenue than perhaps like a nationally syndicated station. I know when I bought the station in Beloit, WGEZ, it was a nationally run syndicated format with no local content whatsoever, and it was not doing very well. And as soon as we put local content on it, it started doing very well. So we totally believe that localism allows radio to take more of their fair share of revenue, and localism at the end of the day is really what differentiates radio, separates radio from the digital players like Pandora or Spotify, or even the in-car competitors like SiriusXM.
Amy outlooks localism as working for local communities, but not big cities.
Yes and no. I think within big cities, there's still smaller communities where people join together. Like if you look at Chicago as an example, there's Lincoln Park and Bucktown, those different areas that are neighborhoods that make it a small town. But a lot of people, yes, in smaller communities do listen to their local radio.
This is Josh Howard, and I'm back in the saddle again with the moment you've been waiting for. Let's go diving, and by diving I say into live reads and produced spots. You probably have no idea what either one of these concepts are. Well, as vindicated by AbsoluteMarketingGroup.com, live reads are when a business's ad is read live on the radio in real time by a radio personality. Produced spots are when a business's ad is not read live, but the ad is recorded in the studio instead and is later aired on the radio. From Big Radio's account rep, Emma Milkey,
Live reads help make the radio successful by spreading word of mouth for a lot of advertisers, but the produced spots are the one that bring in more revenue and make radio more successful.
Amy stands her ground that both live reads and produced spots are successful.
People get used to hearing their favorite morning host or their favorite radio personality. So when they talk about something and endorse it, people listen a little bit differently than they listen when they hear a commercial on the air. But when they hear a commercial, there's more repetition, there's more frequency in that commercial than there is in a live endorsement.
Now comes a topic that normally doesn't get questioned or brought up as much as other topics pertaining to the effectiveness of radio advertising. Do radio advertisements allow radio stations to get favors done from local businesses and advertise the local businesses on the radio station's return for free? For example, could a radio station get its vehicle fixed by a local business and luck out of having to pay the business hard-earned cash by advertising them on the radio? Let's hear Liz's perspective.
We have opportunities to do endorsements for businesses. We'll see that. For example, we can kind of trade out service for radio advertising sometimes. It's definitely an exception to the rule, but there have been instances, for example, the example you used about getting your car fixed. I am sure some of our DJs have had relationships with the client that they are able to, give them a good deal on getting their car fixed because these radio DJs talk about their businesses on their shows. Super common, but it is something that happens for sure. We also have what we call trade relationships with some businesses, where if we needed something printed from a local printer, for example, we could trade advertising for that service. It's our trade relationship.
Now it's time to get Amy's stand on this issue.
We can do trade for advertising. So if the ZOK van needed fixing and we fix it, we could run commercials for them based on trade. But there's actually something that's called payola plugola, where if Steve Shannon went and got his car fixed, he cannot plug the place where he got his car fixed if they're giving him something in return for it. There has to be a signed contract agreement.
There are two types of radio: standard, also known as terrestrial radio, and online radio. The question is, which one is more effective for presenting radio ads? Ben stands true to his belief.
We definitely find that standard or terrestrial radio, like the over-the-air signal, is more influential and drives more revenue. Really, the online radio component of it is just another platform for our terrestrial radio signal. So that is just another avenue for listeners to listen to our stations, is through online radio. That's how we view online radio. Terrestrial radio is really where we get the big reach, where we are able to really drive results for our advertisers. And that's not to say that we don't have a lot of listeners on online radio either, but it's just another platform for people to receive our content.
Amy added,
I think they both have a different audience. A lot of people listen when they're at work now because they can turn it on their computer in their cubicle and listen. They don't have to be in their car or in front of a terrestrial radio.
Additionally, the promotions department plays a crucial part in the upbringing of live broadcasts. According to Emma,
They sure do. We do a lot of live broadcasts here at Big Radio. Live broadcasts encourage our listeners to come out and meet our on-air personalities, learn a little bit more about the businesses that we're working with and messages that we are trying to spread. And live broadcasts are just a lot more interactive than simply listening in your car or on the radio, wherever you are. They're a lot more interactive with the on-air team.
Heather expanded.
Again, I believe if they are done correctly, they can make an impact. Same thing that I just said, that it is all dependent upon, we're not the party. If you're very good about planning, having a reason for us to stop and pull the car over, then yes, they can be very successful. The radio personalities are no longer celebrities that people want to just stop by and shake hands and kiss babies with. There has to be a reason for them to stop and to increase the traffic.
Door swings can be quite rewarding depending on the business.
Absolutely. I think that business owners this day and age are looking for promotional ideas. Anybody can sell spots and dots. They want creative ideas to get the door swings.
Adam added on to Heather's idea.
Yeah, big time. The things that we're doing just, for promotions, whether that's getting out and doing something as far as remotes at local businesses, those are all opportunities for us to go out and sell. So that's a huge, huge impact on our bottom line and on our business. And then getting people out on location to other people's business. Obviously, that's the end goal of any advertising. So doing those on-site promotions are kind of a home run.
Before we examine the opposing views to radio advertising, let's bring in two perspectives about the benefit of radio personalities being able to voice track. First of all, Radio.co spells out that voice tracking is when radio personalities set up a set of different songs and place recorded talk breaks and commercials in between. Liz finds voice tracking to be very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. What that allows your on-air staff to do is what we call wearing a lot of different hats in the business. I am the marketing director, but I'm also on air, so I have the ability to record my daily show ahead of time, and that allows me more opportunities here in the office to do things like help the sales team and execute promotions and stuff like that. So that's where that benefit comes in.
Mike added,
In some situations, it absolutely has. For example, we have our midday personality here, Midday Michelle, is aired in 10 markets across town square, across the country. It gives us the ability in some cases, not all, but in some cases, to have a better, stronger personality on the air in some of the smaller markets that we are in. But that's not a universal rule, so it does in certain situations help.
I spoke with the president of Finnegan's RV Center in Beloit, Wisconsin, Mark Finnegan. Even though Mark perceives radio advertising as beneficial to his business, he still sees one downside of purchasing radio advertising.
Really, the only disadvantage, I would say, Josh, would be cost. It's an expense, becomes a seasonal issue because we're a seasonal business, so we don't do any of it during the winter. And then you strike it in the springtime when people are getting active and starting to get ready to think about going camping for the summer.
The assistant owner of L&C Automotive in Beloit, Wisconsin, Chet King, didn't have such a positive experience with buying radio ads.
We have advertised in the past, yes. We were mainly print advertising, yellow pages. Radio was a really small part of it, only because of the limited market reach that we felt we could get that way, given the number of radio stations out there that are pushing for airtime. Well, if your people are driving down the road, they can hear your business. It kind of gives them a really great idea. I guess the only drawback to it, if I may elaborate on this, it's also a very cluttered market, so, there's always a lot going on when people are driving down the road, and they have a tendency to, skip stations or listen passively. So sometimes we sort of felt that maybe our advertising dollars weren't getting the reach that we really initially intended. You really don't know if people are actually listening or they're just listening passively, and you try to pick a certain time slot where you think your advertising dollars are most effective. But for us, we really never had a decent way of tracking the effectiveness of that. I think that with the onslaught of all the Sirius XM radio markets, people like to be able to steer away from all that background noise of advertising and jingles, and be able to actually listen to the music. I think people try to rely more lately on social media and maybe print media to some degree, although that seems to be fading away too, to target their audience.
Finally, here's what Culver's manager of Beloit, Wisconsin, Bill Locke, has to say on what disadvantages there are with radio advertising.
I guess I would say probably some of the disadvantages is making sure that you are capturing the right message, and sometimes it's kind of hard to change the message on a dime. I guess it's probably easier than newspaper print, but still, that's probably the biggest thing.
Despite these responses, radio ads continue to benefit the business and the listener. Emma stands true to the fact that
Radio ads make radio successful from a listener's viewpoint because they can learn about what is happening in the community, they can learn more about businesses, and even learn about jobs available in the community as well.
Additionally, according to Emma,
ads make radio successful from a business's standpoint because they can get their word out and they can work on their branding of their business, and they can also spread messages, whether it's a call to action or increase awareness about their business and what they offer.
Heather reminds us,
The ad has to be creative. The ad has to be point on. It has to have a valid business reason. If there's not a reason for me to come in, I'm not going to show up. I always say that, we can invite as many people as we want to your party, but if there's not a reason for us to come, then there's not a reason. So therefore, if it's an effective ad, the radio campaign is going to be far more successful and get the listeners to come in.
Amy added,
Radio's always been considered theater of the mind. So when you're writing a radio commercial, you try to get the listener to envision how it feels, sounds, tastes, and feels. So they're imagining it as they're listening to it on the air.
According to research from newsgeneration.com, radio actually reaches 93% of people weekly, whereas television only attracts 88% of people weekly.
Yeah, radio is still a very viable market. A lot of people still listen to the radio. 93% of the general population listens to radio on a weekly basis. So we have the largest reach of any other medium in the world, more than Facebook, more than any other digital platform, more than TV, more than smartphones. Consumers are still listening to the radio, and it just allows us the ability to put advertisers' ads in front of that audience and drive business for those advertisers. So I definitely say it's a very viable market, and we are still able to generate a lot of success for our advertisers, and we also have a lot of listeners as well.
Ben holds true to this statement. Michael agrees with Ben.
Absolutely, 100%. Now, again, I'll keep coming back to we need to continue to evolve. In the case of Town Square as a company and here in Rockford, we are very committed to the local community here. You touched on the question before where you talked about sort of syndicated or programs recorded outside the market. Town Square is very much a live and local company, and that's what sets radio apart from so many different media, is that it is a local media. So we still pride ourselves on that, but it's absolutely still a viable medium.
If there's anything that I want you to take away from today's show, it would be that radio advertising is still very effective because radio is adapted to the best of both worlds. It holds a social media presence. It allows for rewarding door swings, and 93% of the world's population listens to the radio every week, even though some people feel that online streaming services are more common than standard terrestrial radio and that you can't tell people are actively listening to the ads. I'd like to thank my guests Ben, Liz, Adam, Heather, Michael, Amy, Emma, Mark, Chet, and Bill. For Rock on Radio, this is Josh Howard. Thanks so much for listening, and see you next time.